I'm Kristi Pelzel, Senior International Correspondent with Today News Africa. Joining me is Rama Hansraj, Country Director for Save the Children in South Sudan. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much, Kristi.
Leading up to this interview, we've had a ton of connectivity issues. What's the digital connectivity like there normally, and how does that hinder your work?
Most often we rely on satellite connection, usually at the end of the month and all, when the bandwidth is consumed totally, there are huge connectivity issues at that point of time. So we have to, sometimes rely on satellite, sometimes really see, if we can postpone meetings for a couple of days and couple of hours.
You are in the capital city right now, is that right?
Yes, I am based in Juba.
And then where are your missions around the country?
We work in about 7 states, which are Northern Bara Ghazal, Upper Nile, Lakes, Jonglei, Eastern Equatoria, Warrap, and also we work in, Abyei, which is an independently administered area.
So there are some conflicts that are going on internally in South Sudan right now. Maban County, we hear, and then, there's also the Ethiopian internal crisis, which is pushing some refugees into Sudan and South Sudan. Are you dealing with any of that?
So not with the Tigray crisis, but, yes, Maban, I don't know if you know the contextual dynamics there. Maban is a place where a lot of NGOs are providing humanitarian assistance to refugees that came from Sudan. And this moment, there are many layers to the conflict in Maban, or crisis, I should say, not conflict exactly. Recently, several armed clashes, looting and vandalization of, civilian property was reported, especially in the Maban County itself throughout December and January. Very specific areas that have been impacted by it. And this is basically linked to several groups that are very active in Maban area, including Mabanese Defense Forces. Due to the nature of the area, with both Sudanese refugees living there and the host communities, there are multiple levels of issues here with splintered groups and political affiliations and beliefs that impact the security of the region.
And how do you stay safe? Do you have your own security, or is that provided by the government?
So most often, government is the primary duty bearer for providing security to all the human rights, the humanitarian organizations.
Mm-hmm.
However, to operate in South Sudan, each organization has its own security team that basically provides, oversight and support to deal with any specific crises on ground.
Tell me exactly what you do. What services do you provide?
Save the Children, as the name suggests, we are a child-centered organization, and most of our programs are around making sure children and their families are supported to make sure the children can actually, learn, thrive, and survive in the countries such as South Sudan. So main programmatic areas that we intervene at the moment are child protection, education, health, nutrition, and food security and livelihood support that we provide. We have a combination of services. We do provide life-saving services, which is more a humanitarian assistance to make sure that communities are able to access immediate services, while we also look at long-term sustainable programming that basically will help communities build resilience for long term.
That's great. That's great. And when we talk about the children of Sudan, how many children are we talking about? Because isn't the majority of the population under 20 years old?
Yeah, so the total population of South Sudan is approximately 10.9 million. There's no recent census, but that's based on the previous demographic data. So it stands at 10.9, out of which almost 41.57% are children between 0 to 14. So you're right. It's like close to 50% are children below 14 years old in the country.
what would you say your biggest challenge is today?
The context is so volatile. There are lots of challenges, day-to-day challenges here in the country. You'll see in 2020, I mean, several humanitarian workers were killed in the line of duty. And we've seen in just 1 month in January, one of my staff was killed in Akobo, and one of them was shot last week. So there's kind of lot of insecurity in some of the areas, and the revenge killings in some of the locations are quite evident. And I think this is exposing humanitarian workers a lot. And I think, I mean, without the support from law enforcement and, the government, we will, we might lose a lot of humanitarian workers in the coming years as well. We also had like several incidents where staff are forced to be relocated. So what happens is whenever there is a sudden eruption of violence or insecurity, the humanitarian workers are obligated to suspend activities and remove staff from those locations. So almost 190 cases of such relocations happened in 2020. Wow. And we think that this might continue to happen this year as well.
If I was to pull together all the keywords that you've told me during this interview, this is a tough assignment.
It is, absolutely. And I think I would give the credit to, our colleagues who work in the front line. I think their lives are much harsher than people who are trying to support from, from capital city Juba, of course, which is much different in terms of, the facilities and the comforts we have.
Is there anything else that you'd like to add that you want people to know that we haven't discussed?
Yeah, I think, there are like historical challenges in the country. I mean, the long list of issues that children face, which it won't be an exaggeration to say that South Sudan is one of the countries in the world where a child experiences almost all forms of, violence, trauma, deprivation, and lack of access to basic services that are very crucial for their physical and mental well-being. So I really would like to, stress upon the fact that the world needs to take a look at South Sudan. Yes, people might think that a lot of investment has gone into South Sudan, but it's such a unique context at this moment when the government is really working hard to bring all stakeholders onto one platform. Again, I mean, South Sudan is faced with this chronic hunger and, infrastructure issues and, access to basic services are not available for people. So we think that, these constant challenges are posing a huge threat to the next generation of children. And, I think international community should take note of it and make sure that it is supporting both South Sudan government and the humanitarian actors on ground to be able to, help people cope with the current humanitarian crisis in the country.
The work you're doing, it's so important. It's so difficult mentally and physically on the people on the front lines, especially, like you said, and that is not lost on me or many, many people across the globe. Thank you so much for your global public service. I hope you stay safe.
Thank you, Kristi. Thank you so much for those kind words. I really appreciate the time you spent with me for having this conversation.